Trump's trade war is collapsing, and it's uniting his biggest enemies against him. While the world watches Donald Trump escalate tariff threats across North America, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney just pulled off a masterclass in diplomatic chess by flying to Mexico City. What happened there should have Trump sweating bullets in the White House. We're talking about a complete realignment of North American power dynamics. With two countries Trump thought he could bully now joining forces against him. So, what exactly did Carney accomplish in Mexico? And why is this visit sending shockwaves through Washington? To understand the magnitude of this shift, we need to rewind to how Trump's trade war began and how spectacularly it's backfiring. Trump launched his second-term trade assault with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. On February 1st, 2025, he slapped 25% tariffs on all goods from Mexico and Canada, sparing only Canadian oil and energy exports, which still face a 10% tariff. His justification? An extraordinary threat posed by illegal aliens and drugs. But Trump's strategy began to fall apart almost immediately. Canada retaliated with 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of American goods, with plans to expand that to $155 billion. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum denounced Trump's tariffs as a flagrant violation of the USMCA and promised her own retaliation. Trump's real nightmare, however, came when he realized the tariffs weren't working as intended. By March, he was already scrambling to shield American automakers, carving out temporary exemptions for USMCA-compliant products until April. Then in August, he escalated again, raising tariffs to 35% on non-USMCA goods from Canada. The problem? His trade war was backfiring at home. By late 2025, American consumers were paying nearly $1,300 more per household, making it the largest tax hike since 1993. Businesses were screaming, supply chains were buckling, and Trump's promise of easy trade victories was turning into an economic disaster. What makes this even more humiliating is how badly Trump misread the political landscape. Early in the trade war, Canadian provincial premiers like Doug Ford and Danielle Smith floated the idea of cutting Mexico out of any future trade deal with the U.S. Trump likely thought he could exploit these divisions, playing Canada and Mexico against each other. Instead, Carney just flipped the script.
Meeting there on the sidelines of the summit, and it seemed to go pretty well. That was a sign that Canada was making progress and kind of repairing or smoothing over some relations with Mexico that may have gotten rattled in the early days of Trump's second presidency when he imposed those tariffs, the fentanyl tariffs, on both Canada and Mexico. And then Ontario Premier Doug Ford came out and suggested that Canada should essentially drop Mexico as a trading partner and focus on a negotiation with the United States.
But Trump's aggressive tactics had the opposite effect. The fentanyl tariffs he imposed on both countries, along with sectoral tariffs on autos, steel, aluminum, and softwood lumber, gave Canada and Mexico a common enemy and a shared reason to cooperate. Enter Mark Carney's genius move. While Trump was busy throwing economic tantrums, Carney was quietly building the coalition that would ultimately neutralize Trump's leverage. His visit to Mexico City on September 18th and 19th wasn't just diplomatic theater.
For joining us, U.S. President Donald Trump and his tariffs are likely to be a topic of conversation as Prime Minister Mark Carney meets with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico City. Carney departed Ottawa and arrived in Mexico early this afternoon. Sheinbaum has said the meetings with the Canadian Prime Minister are not meant to undermine their trade agreement with the U.S., known as CUSMA. Carney and Sheinbaum are expected to sign a strategic partnership agreement that will cover infrastructure, trade, security, and more. They'll also join discussions on how Canada and Mexico can work together to combat drug and firearm trafficking and other activities linked to organized crime. The trip comes as Ottawa looks for more trade with Mexico in response to the U.S. trade war. Both countries are also bracing for the renegotiation of the Continental Trade Deal, linking all three economies.
It was a strategic masterstroke that fundamentally shifted the balance of power in North America. The meetings covered everything from trade partnerships to infrastructure development, with both countries coordinating their strategies for the upcoming renegotiation of the Continental Trade Agreement. Carney met with President Claudia Sheinbaum at the National Palace, and what emerged should terrify Trump's trade team. The two leaders announced a new comprehensive strategic partnership that effectively creates a Canada Mexico economic alliance independent of U.S. whims. And this isn't just about trade. It's about building supply chains designed to bypass the United States entirely. Sheinbaum specifically highlighted plans to strengthen maritime routes so goods would no longer have to pass through U.S. territory. Think about that. Two of America's largest trading partners are now actively working to reduce their dependence on U.S. infrastructure and markets. But it gets even worse for Trump. Mexico is Canada's third largest trading partner, after the U.S. and China, with nearly $56 billion in two-way trade last year. Canadian companies already dominate Mexico's mining sector, accounting for nearly 70% of all foreign investment. What Carney achieved in Mexico City was transforming this existing relationship into a strategic weapon against Trump's trade aggression. The timing couldn't be more devastating for Washington. The USMCA is up for mandatory review in July 2026. Instead of facing two separate countries he might divide and conquer, Trump now faces a unified Canada-Mexico front. As Nelson Wiseman, professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, put it,
it's a remarkable question. Of course, we are going to cooperate directly as we always have. USMCA is strength together. It's strength of the three countries together. That's what makes North America that contributes to North America be the economic envy of the world. And Canada is absolutely committed to work with both our partners. If there's opportunities to improve the agreement, we will pursue those. We can think of some. Our Mexican colleagues can. I'm sure the Americans will as well. That'll be informed by our review process. But we'll move forward together with our question. Is that unequivocal enough for you?
Mexico and Canada now share a common threat from the United States. Carney and Sheinbaum recognize that tag-teaming Trump may be far more effective than competing for separate deals. The message is unequivocal. North America is the economic envy of the world, and that strength comes from cooperation among all three countries, not division that, as Laura McDonald of Carleton University observed, after 8 months of Trump's trade war. It has become clear that Canada is not better off without Mexico. Going at it separately from the Mexicans would just weaken us, she noted. The economic implications of the Canada-Mexico partnership are staggering. Mexico controls multiple major ports on both coasts, Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas on the Pacific, Veracruz and Altamira on the Gulf. Manzanillo alone is undergoing a massive expansion that will allow it to handle 5 million containers annually by 2030, twice the volume that currently moves through Montreal and Vancouver combined. Mexican officials are already eager to discuss expanding Canadian ports and constructing dedicated facilities to support bilateral trade in goods such as minerals. This kind of infrastructure development forges lasting economic ties, connections that will endure well beyond any Trump presidency.
We're both undertaking massive transformations of our economy. Plan Mexico, Canada strong. Our efforts will be strengthened by working together.
Mexico and Canada want to do more on two fronts. First, work together to save North America-wide free trade by coordinating strategies for next year's review of CUSMA, the trade deal that replaced the original NAFTA 5 years ago.
How do we eliminate these tariffs that we both face prior to the end of the year so that we can have a fruitful discussion on the USMCA future beginning in 2020?
The discussions even extended to potential Mexican investment in Canadian port infrastructure and Mexico's interest in replicating Canada's healthcare system. Evidence of just how deep this cooperation could go. But Trump's failures stretch far beyond economics. His entire approach to North American relations has rested on the assumption that he could intimidate smaller neighbors into submission. Carney's visit to Mexico shows the opposite. Trump's bullying tactics have only strengthened the resolve of America's neighbors to build alternatives to U.S. markets and supply chains, A.S. Carney declared during his visit. North America is the economic envy of the world, the most competitive economic region on the planet. And part of the reason for that is the cooperation between Canada and Mexico. We complement the United States. We make them stronger. We are all stronger together. The contrast in leadership styles could not be clearer. While Trump threatens and blusters, Carney builds coalitions and forges lasting partnerships. while Trump's tariffs are being struck down in U.S. courts, with the Court of International Trade declaring his executive orders unlawful. Carney is laying down sustainable, legal trade frameworks that will endure long after Trump leaves office. Trump's trade war has also exposed the fragility of his negotiating position. Despite his threats, more than 75% of Canada's exports and over 80% of Mexico's still flow to the U.S. Yet Carney's partnership with Mexico is creating viable alternatives that will steadily reduce this dependence. Every new trade route, every expanded port, every bilateral agreement chips away at Trump's leverage over North American commerce. The announcement of nearly $10 million in Canadian funding for UN projects in Mexico, including migrant integration programs and anti-fentanyl initiatives, was another strategic strike. Carney is addressing Trump's stated border security concerns through cooperation rather than confrontation, making Trump's tariff justifications look hollow and punitive. And the damage to Trump's America First narrative is devastating. By driving Canada and Mexico together, Trump has made the United States less central to North American trade and security. The new Canada-Mexico Comprehensive Strategic Partnership includes regular leader and minister-level meetings, creating an institutional framework for a cooperation that operates entirely outside U.S. influence. Trump's response has been predictably chaotic. His tariffs remain in place despite court rulings against them. His administration is scrambling to contain the fallout as industries suffer. Meanwhile, Carney and Sheinbaum are methodically constructing the infrastructure of a future in which their economies are less dependent on U.S. markets. The implications extend far beyond trade. As the three countries prepare to co-host the 2026 FIFA World Cup, the Canada-Mexico partnership proves that North American cooperation does not require U.S. leadership. From energy to security to climate change, Canada and Mexico are now charting paths of collaboration while the U.S., under Trump, isolates itself through aggression. Looking ahead to the 2026 USMCA review, Trump faces a nightmare of his own making. Instead of two neighbors he might divide and intimidate, he confronts a united Canada-Mexico alliance that has spent years cultivating alternatives to American dominance. The leverage he imagined his tariffs would create has vanished, replaced by a coalition of neighbors determined to prosper without bowing to Washington's threats. Carney's Mexico visit was more than successful diplomacy. It was a complete repudiation of Trump's worldview. While Trump builds walls, Carney builds bridges. While Trump divides, Carney unites. The result is a North America where the United States, under Trump, grows increasingly isolated, while its neighbors grow stronger through partnership. The ultimate irony is that Trump's trade war, meant to reinforce American power, has instead eroded it. By forcing Canada and Mexico together, he has created the very coalition he should have feared most. Two dynamic economies working in lockstep to reduce dependence on U.S. markets and create alternatives to American dominance. As this new partnership develops, one fact is undeniable. Trump's tariff strategy hasn't just failed, it's backfired spectacularly. Mark Carney's visit to Mexico City marks the beginning of a new era in North American relations, one where cooperation trumps confrontation, and where Trump's America is increasingly sidelined by its own neighbors. The question now isn't whether Trump's trade war will collapse. The question is how much more damage it will do to American interests before it finally implodes under the weight of its own contradictions.